Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. On today's agenda, we have item 3 on the Global Biodiversity Framework and the completion of the first reading of item 10 on invasive alien species. We will need to be very efficient to complete this ambitious agenda, so I count on your usual cooperation. I hope the sound is fine. I hear some noise of someone. Colleagues, I would like to remind you that we are on a very tight schedule and our time together is limited. In order to respect our schedule for the day, I would like to ensure that we complete agenda item 3 by break time, hopefully, with your collaboration. So I thank you in advance, your comprehension and collaboration. Let us begin with item 3, and I will explain how I propose to proceed. First, we will consider CRP1 on GBO5, which was developed based on comments received during the informal session in February and our plenaries on 3rd and 4th May. Second, we will listen to a report back from the co-chairs of the contact group I established at the plenary on May 4th, including on their text, which contains scientific and technical advice from SBSTTA to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and to the third meeting of the working group on post-2020. This text also provides general advice on the elements of the monitoring framework and headline indicators, also based on the online survey, which was available from 10 to 19 May 21. Third, we will discuss CRP3, which was developed based on comments from the informal session in February, plenaries on 3 and 4 of May, and meetings of the contact group on 8 and 11 May. So we have these three parts, these three different components to address properly agenda item 3. So let's begin now with CRP1 on GBO5, that, as you recall, GBO5 was launched last September during a special virtual session of SBSTTA, along with the second edition of the Local Biodiversity Outlooks and the 2020 Plant Conservation Report. However, before we begin considering this CRP, I would like to provide a few general remarks related to all the CRPs we will be discussing during this meeting of SBSTTA, which stem from the unique situation in which we find ourselves. First, as agreed with the Bureau, this session of SBSTTA will only agree on CRP documents. The adoption of L documents will take place at a later physical session of SBSTTA, the date of which still needs to be determined by the Bureau, both Bureaus, SBSTTA and COP. As a result, any request to the Executive Secretary for intersessional work between now and COP15 need to be reflected in the report of this meeting and not in the CRPs, right? Similarly, any invitations or requests related to post-2020 working group or its co-chairs will also need to be reflected in the report of this first part of the SBSTTA-24 meeting. Secondly, given that L documents will only be adopted at a later recent meeting of SBSTTA, possibly to be held back-to-back with COP15, In many cases, recommendations from SBSTA to itself may not be practical. Therefore, you will see that in many CRPs, the suggested draft recommendations for SBSTA had been removed, while these were initially proposed in the pre-session documents for this meeting. The decision of the bureaus regarding the timing of SBSTA and adoption of SBSTA recommendations means that in many cases, they are no longer practical. Finally, there is very little time between the closure of this session of SBSTA, the third meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and COP15, particularly when considering the time needed to ensure that the first draft of post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and other documents are available in all languages, and also the rule of 6 weeks. The timing between the current session of SBI and the third meeting of the open-ended working group is even more limited. Taking this into account, it is very limited time available to do any intersessional work, and parties will need to consider this when discussing these elements of the recommendations. So bear in mind the dates, please, to see that we are asking for something realistic and practical. With these remarks, I now propose that we begin our discussion with CRP1 on GBO5. The CRP before us is relatively short. It's only 2 pages or 1.5 pages. While we received some comments on the draft recommendations contained in the pre-session document, they were generally going in the same direction, and we did not see any major points of divergence. We will consider this document paragraph by paragraph. So let us start with the first page. Let me switch also my screens because I'm seeing text, and also to be aware of participants asking for the floor. So let's go paragraph by paragraph. So I open the floor for comments, where we can see that SBSTA is suggesting to the conference of the parties a number of elements. So I open the floor for comments on paragraph 1 that starts with welcomes, and there is also a footnote there. I see Brazil. Brazil, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the recommendation for a COP decision on the GBO5, my delegation would like to comment on the reference made to Brazil on subsidies harmful to biodiversity. From the outset, the reference is based not on a scientific study published in an academic journal, but on a working paper from a think tank published in 2015. Having a closer look at this working paper, we were surprised by how it handled data on Brazilian programs. From the outset, we highlight 2 quotes from that working paper. First, all the subsidies identified are provided through broad agriculture support programs, rather than being subsidies specifically targeted. Second, as recognized by the working paper, there are no subsidies in Brazil for land access and clearing. Hence, it is struggling to follow how this paper could reach an identification of subsidies and their characterization as something that could be harmful to biodiversity. Furthermore, and even more worrisome, is how data and numbers from different Brazilian programs were presented. First, almost all of the resources identified as subsidies are actually from the Growth Acceleration Program, an old program aimed at infrastructure construction, improvement, and expansion, like railways and ports. We wonder in which country or under which international norm that would be considered a subsidy. Second, the working paper refers to a program aimed at families that live with under $400 a month. We also wonder if anyone here can imagine this kind of agricultural family could have a production harmful to biodiversity. We regret that the editors relied on such a poor quality work to be included in the GBO5. It makes us wonder what else in GBO5 lacks scientific standard and therefore raise concerns on GBO5 credibility. For this reason, Mr. Chairman, Brazil cannot welcome GBO5, any reference to it, or encourage its user or dissemination. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I understand your views about the, if I understand properly, the whole document, but you are not making any specific proposal for to amend specifically paragraph 1 on the welcomes. Do you have any proposal on this point, Brazil? You have the floor again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we would suggest to delete the reference to the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, including its summary for policymakers, as well as so it would read, welcomes the publication of the 2nd edition of Local Biodiversity Outlook and the 2020 Plant Conservation Report.
Thank you, Brazil. Well, as we can see, the whole document is about GBO5. I can understand that the one party does not welcome the publication. That's very clear. But the whole document is about GBO5 outcomes, and it's a number of recommendations to parties to take into account, and also to take into account for post-2020 elaboration. So I take your point at this moment. Yeah, there's a lot of noise behind. Let me hear more views and to see a possible way forward. Thank you. Any other comments from parties on paragraph 1 that start with welcomes the publication of GBO5? I think UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK would like to support the paragraph as it is and to welcome the Global Biodiversity Outlook. We think this is a very fundamental piece of work which supports the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We understand that the report went through several rounds of peer review where there's an opportunity to comment on its contents. We understand that there may be some elements within it which some parties may have concerns with, but on the other hand, it is a very important contribution to the work of the Convention, and we would like to retain that paragraph as it stands. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. UK, and you're right, it was a very long process through a peer review, and also some drafts were revised in previous Substat meeting. Thank you very much. Now I see Canada followed by Mexico and Norway. Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada would like to support UK's comment just here. This document was submitted to extensive peer review. We think it's an important document to take into consideration. With regards to paragraph 1, we would have just one small comment. First of all, we welcome the inclusion of the local biodiversity outlook in the plant conservation report. We think these reports are very important. We just have one question with regards to the words the publication. Are we welcoming the process, or are we welcoming the reports themselves? So Canada would think that we could remove after welcomes the words the publication and simply welcomes the 5th edition and so on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Canada, and also for the suggestion. I hope we can move forward. I give the floor to Mexico, followed by Norway.
Gracias, señor presidente. México.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico would also like to support retaining the paragraph as drafted, perhaps with Canada's suggestions to delete the part about publication. We understand that these reports have been part of the diagnosis for developing the global biodiversity framework. So we consider that it's very important to welcome these reports because of what's been mentioned by other countries. Take into account what we said about the publication process. It went through lots of different review processes. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Norway, followed by EU.
Thank you, Chair. So we would also like to retain this paragraph. We think it's very important to welcome the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, but we would also like to follow up the suggestion by Canada. Thank you, Chair.
EU, and I'll come with a proposal.
Sorry for the delay. I would also like to support what the UK was mentioned. We would like to welcome the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have in the list New Zealand and Sweden, and I suppose is about the same position to support this. I see also support for the amendment suggested by Canada to delete the words "the publication of" in order to welcome the 5th edition. GBO5, Local Biodiversity Outlooks and the Plant Conservation Report. I'm wondering if Brazil is willing to include maybe a footnote or some specific paragraph to be included in the report of the meeting with your particular views on this publication, in the understanding that GBO5 is a document elaborated by CBD for many years through really long and open processes. This is the 5th edition that the convention produced this document. And in the last face-to-face meeting we had in Montreal, we saw the outcomes there. We saw the plant conservation reports and also the locals final, and then in the special session we had the final ones. This is a process of this convention. So maybe, do you believe that can be a way forward if you express clearly your points as you said already, on some reference used in this publication? I'll give the floor to Brazil.
Made by other parties, and I understand your suggestion, but I think I made myself clear. And what I would suggest is, in order to have a better use of our time, let's just keep this CRP in brackets. My delegation does not agree at this stage to make any reference to GBO5 due to the reason I mentioned that we consider very grave. So my suggestion is, I think that you'll be in a situation here that you spend lots of time on a simple reference to a document from the Secretariat that the parties were not participating, engaged in the exercise of producing it. It's a Secretariat document. It's the editor's document. It's already published. Okay, so let's not waste our time here. So I would suggest let's keep this on brackets, and maybe you can try on a later stage to come back to this, and let's focus our precious time on issues that you can try to solve now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. I'm wondering if, in the interest of time, what can be the best option to move forward. I really saw that this is not, with the exception of Brazil, this is document that is published. A number of delegations already support the document as they are. I see the suggestion of Brazil. To my view, this is a very clean document, just a minor suggestion from Canada, and which is making a reference on the use of this publication. I am wondering if there were more suggestions for further paragraphs. Well, thinking that this is a merely procedural document where we put for the use this document that was already published since September. As you know, CRP documents at the very end will be turned into an L document to be approved at a face-to-face meeting later, because this is recommendations for the conference of the parties. Just give me a couple of minutes to have some reflections in how to proceed, please. Dear colleagues, sorry for the long break figuring out how to move. I'm very concerned in how are we going to conduct all the amount of work we have for today and the next few days when we are starting this CRP mood to address our documents properly. First of all, on this document, I was double checking and to raise the point that we had the opportunity at the informal meeting to address this point, and also in the first reading of this document, and there were no comments on this nature as currently now Brazil is suggesting for specific points. So this is something that strikes me at this late stage for such a major change proposed. That is why I invite again Brazil delegations to move in terms that you can either put a footnote in the document expressing your concerns, or to include this as part of the report to have a clear note. In the understanding that there were no objections in that point when we had the first reading, and also the big support of parties that are already expressed that they took the floor, and also to the chat. There is a list that I'll ask Secretariat to mention parties that express support for this document, that this is part of the work of our Secretariat together with parties and pass through a full peer review process. I really like to look for cooperation of all of us and to make progress. Can Secretariat read the list of support to the document as they are?
Yes, Chair. So as we asked parties to use chat for expressing support, I can just read support from the chat. It's Portugal, Peru, Chile, Costa Rica, Japan, Sweden, Netherlands, New Zealand, Germany, Georgia, so Mexico. So that's all those countries expressed their clear support to retain the paragraph, also supported by Austria, Denmark, Colombia, Finland, Australia, Israel, Monaco, Spain. So all those parties expressed support for retaining the paragraph. Palau. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I invite the delegation of Brazil, if they see as a way forward to clearly express the concern through the report or to a footnote. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We apologize for the situation, but Brazil has hundreds, maybe thousands of problems in environmental areas. We're the first to recognize that. And we're first to recognize that we need international cooperation to solve these problems. Therefore, that we're concerned that there's no need to falsify reality to create non-existent problems. That's the only issue we have. But we understand the importance of the GPO exercises, the 5th edition. We understand, take into account the support it has and the importance for the work. I have a suggestion. Let's simply take note. And I hope that other parties can understand and we can go along with takes note in this first paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil, for your suggestion. I think it's a way where we can make progress. So let's replace, and I hope other parties understand, and we can move forward on this document. It's already published there. It's a reference that may be taken by parties and observers and stakeholders to move on. So if we replace welcomes by takes notes, I also heard support from the amendment from Canada. also to take note of the 5th edition and so on. And please, with this, and thank you very much for your cooperation, Brazil, I open the floor for comments on paragraph 2, and I will try to do this as quick as possible because we have a lot of things to do, and this is merely a procedural document as such. So I look for cooperation from everybody. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small comment on paragraph 2. I think it's normal to refer to the governments in this list as governments. So we'd suggest adding the financial support provided by the governments of Canada, etc. It's just a normal practice, I think.
Thank you, UK. I hope there is no problem. It's just to have precisions. I invite you not to be perfect on the document, but rather to go to more substantive points if really needed to address your concerns in order to make progress. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 3, which contains from A to D subparagraphs as a block. If you have any comments. I see Portugal. Well, the list is growing and growing. So let me go in order. Please, let's go 3A. Please lower your hands, and I will go one by one because I see many questions. And probably we're going to be jumping from different letters. So, comments on paragraph 3A. I see Portugal first, followed by Canada. On 3A. Portugal, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In para 3A, we propose to revert to contributes, as this is the wording used in GBO5, and indeed the SDGs may contribute but do not necessarily ensure biodiversity conservation and its sustainable use. The way the SDGs are implemented is critical to this contribution. So that's it. Thank you.
So what exactly contribution word should be?
Instead of is crucial, revert to contributes. It's the original wording.
Secretary, verify this, how we read.
The Sustainable Development Goals contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's more close to the language on GBO5. Thank you for the contribution. Canada, followed by UK and Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada has 2 comments. First on para 5, we suggest removing...
No, sorry, Canada.
Sorry, not para 5, sorry, para 3. We suggest removing the word following, so it would be take notes of the general conclusion so that we don't limit ourselves to the ones that are mentioned here. And in para 3A, in order to better reflect the wording of GBO5, after sustainable development goals, we would add comma and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and other international environmental agreement, and continue the wording as it is. Should I reread this again?
Read it again, please.
Okay, so after sustainable development goals, we would add comma and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and other international environmental agreements. And the wording continues as is. This is page 18 of the full GBO5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. This is language already existing in the GBO5, but I invite you again to only when it's absolutely necessary to work on the enhancement. This is, from my point of view, a very procedural document. When a publication is already there and it's put it forward to take in consideration by key stakeholders. Thank you. Now I give the floor to UK, followed by Argentina on 3A.
Thank you, Chair. I can be short. The comments by Portugal and Canada have addressed my issues, so I support those two amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. Argentina, tiene la palabra.
You have the floor, Argentina.
Good day to everybody. Regarding paragraph 3A, for us it would be important to have a balance between how biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development, and the Sustainable Development Agenda contributes as well to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. As stated by the first speaker, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals are not enough to fulfill conservation and sustainable use, but biodiversity is not enough as well to fulfill the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So we would suggest to use biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda, and the Sustainable Development Goals contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Maybe that can be a work around this paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I think it's useful stating first biodiversity contributions. So I will ask Secretariat to read with these amendments how to everybody understand with these changes. I think, yes, please, Secretariat.
Yes, I'll also mention there is support being expressed in the chat so that people can see that if they're interested. So it currently reads, biodiversity is critical to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
No, sorry, Secretariat. With the last amendment from
Argentina?
From Argentina, starting with biodiversity.
Biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda and is critical to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the full, effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and other international environmental agreements. Contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
Now it's difficult at the end with the change. Mm-hmm. But maybe I would like to be practical. If what is the shortest way? Thank you, Argentina, but maybe we need to keep the contribute in the second part, and in order for not to make a long discussion. But so it's critical for 2030 Agenda and the other agreements as it contributes. So can you read again, Secretariat, without the suggestion from Argentina that I think is a good one, but implies more changes at the end of the sentence. There are like many ideas there.
Biodiversity is critical to or we could say biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and other international environmental agreements. Contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. We need and contributes.
Right. This is an idea. What we try to say at the end is that this is mutually supportive. How biodiversity support the implementation of these agreements, and how the implementation of these agreements also support the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. This is the spirit of this paragraph, as I understand it. So the way to make it more is still not reading very well. So we need to help on this. What I'd like to propose is, taking into account these points, I will ask Secretariat to prepare a clean text on this part while we work with further paragraphs, and then we'll go back again. So, well, if I see hands from Brazil, France, EU, and UK, but if you agree with my approach, I can ask Secretariat to work on a simple paragraph reflecting this idea of the mutual dependence, and we can come back later. So I invite you to lower your hands on this. Is something burning, or you have already a solution? I see Brazil and France. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's the first paragraph of substance of GBO5, let's say, and it seems there is not much consensus around it, doesn't it? But let me just make it's very difficult to follow the many different suggestions without seeing the text on the screen. So I apologize if I'm not making the correct reference, since I'm not reading it. But Brazil does not agree to include the reference to the Paris Agreement as it was suggested, to put the emphasis on biodiversity and Paris Agreement. You're on the conference of biodiversity. Let's stick to the mandate, and let's stick to what's agreed under this, and not start including things that comes from other areas that demand lots of discussions on what is meant. So we would prefer not to mix these things, and I would request also, if you have this exercise of reading tests and comments tests, I would please ask your indulgence and please let us see the test on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Now I give the floor to France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to mention that in paragraph D, we have an addition to add at the end of the sentence, and it is in English.
After the word health, comma, adding through transformative changes in these sectors. Nous serions intéressés de voir le.
We would like to see the text on the screen because it's hard to follow the exchanges, and we don't know that we can support the Argentine proposal at this point. So we would like to see the Secretariat's compromise proposal on the text. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Franz. Colleagues, we are complicating things. We are including more elements in the paragraph, where what we are trying to reflect is the mutual dependence of biodiversity for SDGs. I see there is some support for inclusion of more agreements. There's also some resistance, some complaints to include these points. I invite you to be more pragmatic and to be very clear. Sometimes less is more, and we still have many things to do. I heard that France is also looking for a compromise language, a simple language that can be presented by the Secretariat in the view to really make it simple. So I invite you not to include more elements that are absolutely, or they are absolutely necessary from your point of view, but also needs to have the agreement of all of us. So I invite you to be very precise on these points. I have Norway followed by UK.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. So regarding the proposal from Brazil to replace welcomes with take note of in paragraph 1, I think at least we would like to retain welcomes, and my suggestion to Brazil would be that their views are reflected in a footnote, because there's an overwhelming majority that would like to welcome the 5th edition of the GBO. And I think in general that's the way we should proceed. Given the many agenda items and the many meetings we have before us, I think when one party, in this case, would like to have their views reflected, it should be done in a footnote, and I think that's the way we should proceed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. But we will refer at this stage on 3A and take your point on paragraph 1. UK followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. So returning to, firstly to say I support Norway's latest intervention. On returning to paragraph 3A and all of section 3 and 4, we recognise that all this text is a direct reference to what's in the GBO, and therefore we have, although there are aspects of it which we'd like to improve, we would refrain from making any interventions. The only intervention we have is on 3A, because this text doesn't accurately reflect what's in the conclusions. And what the conclusions actually say, which is on the bottom of page 3 in the summary, is biodiversity is critical to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the achievement of and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And conversely, the achievement of the sustainable goals contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. So our suggestion is that we refer to the text which is in the GBO and take the same approach for all of these subparagraphs, because we really don't want to renegotiate what are the conclusions of a published report, but just to accurately reflect what is in that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK, for the intent to make it clear. I'll give the floor to Colombia, followed by Peru.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Sí, adelante.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Chair, we would like to support UK on the request to keep this simple and also to keep it as it is under the GBO. We don't want to keep wasting our time in renegotiating things that we already agreed on. And I take this opportunity also to support Norway on the request to address the Brazil's issue in paragraph 1 as a footnote. We are very, very concerned about the way this process is being undertaken, and we really see the need to move forward. We have been having very intense negotiations in all agenda items, and we would call for the flexibility of all colleagues and parties to move forward and to help you on moving forward very fast in these and other agenda items. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Muchas gracias, Colombia. Gracias por su apoyo.
Thank you very much, Colombia, and thank you for your support and your will to make progress and make substantial progress on this.
Again, let's say the short version based on suggestions from UK and also what you were trying to do to make it simple. Secretariat?
The suggestion from the UK would be to follow the wording from GBO 5 as mentioned. This was stated as biodiversity is critical to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And conversely, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
Right. I would like to know if that language is acceptable. Another one concern on the specific mention of Paris Agreement, but I hope this can be acceptable. I will ask Secretariat to read it again, so everybody would understand exactly how it looks like with this inclusion. Please.
Biodiversity is critical to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals, and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And conversely, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
I think it was missing a part and other international agreements of the protection of.
That was not in the intervention by the UK.
Okay. I have Peru followed by Argentina. Peru, tiene la palabra.
Buenos días. Have the floor. Good day, good afternoon, good evening. Chair, Peru is asking that under D, we're not at 3D, we're at 3A at the moment. Okay, well then we'll wait. Thank you. Argentina now? Thank you, Chair. Well, when it comes to the references from other delegations about not renegotiating what's already been negotiated in the GBO, we have to take note of the fact that the GBO is not a negotiated document, and now we're including text from this document in a recommendation for COP to adopt. So copy and pasting text from the GBO, we think, is not the most appropriate approach here. Now, without getting more involved in this, we can live with the paragraph as mentioned in the GBO if we change the is critical at the beginning into contributes, for the same reasoning as we've already mentioned. Namely, it's not necessary to establish hierarchy between biodiversity and the Sustainable Development Agenda and the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. And the way in which it's drafted seems to say that biodiversity is more important than these other agendas and instruments, whereas these other instruments and agendas actually partially contribute to conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. And I'd also like to recall that for many developing countries, and it's been recognized in our convention, that there are many economic and social aspects that are priorities such as poverty eradication, so that we can then attain environmental objectives. And the way in which it's drafted originally seems to not recognize that reality that is the immense reality in the global south. So we'd like that to be reflected. And if we're going to include specific conclusions, then we need to be flexible and able to express what parties really understand about the GBO. And otherwise, we can just say takes note of the conclusions from the 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook and not negotiate each of these conclusions and just end the paragraph there, full stop. Thank you.
Yes, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina. So I understand your suggestion to highlight the fact that biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda. And the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, and then the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And they also contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, to try and keep this very, very simple. So I'd like to ask the Secretariat to please read this out once again. Please read out the paragraph as it was originally, talking about biodiversity contributes rather than is critical.
I apologize. I'm not positive where Argentina wanted to end the paragraph. I believe we're trying to shorten it also.
Right.
So, I mean, I can read the paragraph out, but I think I'm not sure that we have the view of Argentina, so perhaps they come back after I read it.
Yes, read it, please, and then if not, I will have another proposal.
Yeah. So, biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And conversely, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
Right. That's I believe the best reading of this paragraph. If we want to keep paragraphs from A to E. So my question is that acceptable as Secretariat just read it? Read it for the last time, and if I see no more comments, I will understand this is acceptable for all. Please read it for once and again. And
biodiversity contributes to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals and the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. And conversely, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals contributes to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity.
Thank you very much. Is that acceptable? I see Canada. Canada, you have the floor. Canada.
I only see Uganda.
Yes, Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of points, one of which is a procedural one. It is to support the intervention by Brazil and others who have asked for support from the Secretariat to ensure that we have this document on the screen. Chair, we acknowledge, we appreciate that you want us to make progress, but the process as it is right now is bad enough for some of us because of internet connections. We're having challenges following the discussions. And on top of that, there are changes being made to a text that we don't even see and therefore being asked to agree on something that we don't see. So, Chair, I would like to seek your indulgence to get the Secretariat to help us put the text on the screen so that we know where we are and what we are being asked to agree to. Secondly, to the point by Argentina, we support that point, that we seem to be picking and choosing from the published text of the GBO5. And that this is not consistent. It is just we pick what we want and put it up there. And so we would like to see where there is a need for it to have specific reference in the form of a footnote that suggests that SDGs also contribute to third objective of the convention, not just conservation and sustainable use. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. I see your point of requesting the use of the screen, but really, the experience of many years in our meetings is that it's a tremendous temptation to go to many details and to increase the amount of changes that can be complicated. I will try as much as possible to have clarity, and if there is no way, then we will use the screen, but all of us will need to behave. Let me make a pragmatical suggestion following a recommendation from Argentina to really make progress, to not rephrase again conclusions from GBO. We can simply say takes note of general conclusions from the 5th edition of Global Biodiversity Outlook and to delete paragraphs from A to E. We're just taking a note of the general conclusions. The publication is already there. It was a special event in September, and everybody is aware of that. Can we proceed in that way? Sometimes, colleagues, less is more. We know already the main messages and the importance of biodiversity, and seems like unnecessarily we are rephrasing and getting into complications. This document is very clear. We can leave welcomes and also takes note in brackets both, taking into account comments on paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is fine with the inclusion of governments. Paragraph 3 will say simply to take note of general conclusions, and we can move to paragraph 4. Is that acceptable? Is any objection to my way forward proposed? Peru, you have the floor. Are you objecting to this approach?
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Peru would like to include a subject that we haven't heard so far, namely the importance of mountains, where it says including transitions in the management of land, comma, forests, comma, mountains, and then continue with freshwater ecosystems, comma, oceans, comma, and then fishery activities, comma, agriculture, and then the paragraph would continue. That's 3D, points out the interpreter. Thank you, Peru. But I'm suggesting that we should eliminate all of the paragraphs from 3A to E to not get into the details of what's part of the conclusions of this publication, because we're basically highlighting what already exists in this publication. And to try not get involved in all these complications, my proposal is that we would simply stick to the heading of paragraph 3, takes note of the general conclusions from the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, and then delete paragraphs A down to E. That's my proposal, to see if you agree less is more, as I've said, and then we'd be able to move ahead on other topics. Yes, I completely understand, Chair. I perfectly understand, says Peru, but I'd like to point out that the subject of mountains is highlighted in the GBO, and it is an important one. Thank you, Peru. And I've taken note of that point to reflect the importance of mountains, and that's part of the conclusions. But as I've said, less is more here. So now, South Africa and then New Zealand, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think paragraph 4 also should follow the same route, because it's taking note of the lessons learned as identified in the GBO 5. So we can delete all the paragraphs and sub-paragraphs under paragraph 4. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, South Africa. I understand you support my approach for paragraph 3, and you are also suggesting to apply the same in paragraph 4.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Chair. New Zealand thinks it's a pity and a missed opportunity that this group cannot agree on a simple outline of what the general conclusions are from the 5th edition from the Global Biodiversity Outlook. As others have said, all we're doing is taking note of the general conclusions, and it should have been easy for us to pick those out and use the wording straight from the GBO itself. That said, we agree with you that it is proving extraordinarily difficult, and so if this is the way forward that is acceptable to most, and notwithstanding the fact that New Zealand in its original comments had said that this listing of what the general conclusions are would enhance the draft recommendations, we could live with your proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, New Zealand, and I understand your concern, but I'm in your hands, and I'm trying to be practical on the very limited time we have, and because it takes go one by one on the details. I hope we can move, and I thank your flexibility and support. Thank you. Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation supports your proposal. It's very simple, very precise and concise, without getting into details, which risks redundancies. And so, Chair, is little e also removed? Or are we just talking about A to D? Because there is a 3E. Do you want that removed as well? That's a question for you, Chair.
Morocco is deleting all from A to E in paragraph 3, and also to delete from A to H in paragraph 4, as also proposed by South Africa. To be practical, in this case, less is more. China, you have the floor.
谢谢主席先生，请问
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Translation need to turn it off.
好的，好的，谢谢主席。请问您能听到我的发言吗？
Can you hear me now? Okay, first of all, we would like to express our position. We support very much what you had said from the beginning, meaning that we need to adopt this CRP1 in very limited time. So we can support your proposal for the paragraph 3 and 4. We don't need to take all the details about the conclusions and about the lessons learned, because I can say most of us have a version of the GBO5. If we need to refer to any conclusions or any lessons learned, we can go to check in the GBO. So I support your proposal, Chair.
Thank you very much, China. So I hear support for the proposal to delete. So paragraph 3 will read, takes note of the general conclusions of the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook. Paragraph 4 will read, also take note of lessons learned from the implementation of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011-2020, identified in the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, full stop. And then we may continue with the last paragraph, with paragraph 5, which says encourage parties and invite other governments and local and subnational governments, as well as relevant organizations, to use the report and take steps to widely disseminate its finding, including by translating the report in local languages and producing other appropriate communication products for stakeholders, and to make use of the report when implementing post-2020. That's the general message of the whole document, very simplified. I see Sweden asking for the floor. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Sweden would like to express its concerns that we're actually taking away all the key messages of this document, since they were quite important to be considered for the GBF as well. So if we take away all the key messages, the document really has to welcome the report and not just take note. That said, we can go along with your proposal, but we have a proposal for the last paragraph, and we think we should add an S in the use to use the reports, since we actually welcome or take note, and we really want to welcome the GBO5, the LBO2, and the third report. So it should be all three reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden, and thank you for your understanding. Of course, there's a reference to key messages that you can look when you revise the document as such, and with the precision of the S. And to maintain in brackets both words, welcomes and take notes on paragraph 1, and then to keep the simplified version of paragraphs 3 and 4. I have Brazil, followed by Argentina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm surprised by the reaction of some parties and been very positive towards their reaction. I have a suggestion that if they could accept the takes note in the first paragraph, and you could accept this fifth paragraph encouraging its use and dissemination, I think then it's a package that we could live with, and we hope that is acceptable as a measure from our side to have a consensus on this. So Brazil would reiterate its position to keep the takes note in the first paragraph, and you could live with the fifth paragraph as suggested by Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I will hear now from Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to highlight that we're ready to analyse each of the conclusions listed and take the opportunity that we didn't have when developing the GBO to be able to negotiate these conclusions between the parties that we can draw from the GBO. We were able to do a peer review, but of course there's limitations with a peer review when it comes to including all of the comments we'd like to see included. However, if we have to save time and move ahead, we can support your proposal to delete this, to make sure we don't get bogged down in negotiating small details of the subparagraphs under paras 3 and 4. Thank you. Thank you, Argentina. And it was part of your idea that I liked. It's more practical without renegotiating conclusions that are already within this publication. And we want to pass on the main conclusions to the key actors that are in the document so they can use them and that they can be taken account of for preparing, for example, the zero draft of the GBF and to support implementation thereof. Is there another party? I believe Colombia is asking for the floor.
Sure, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. I just wanted to ask for clarification if with your proposal for para 3, we would also include in brackets the wording welcomes in order to keep consistency with para 1. If not, we would ask to include welcomes in brackets in para 3 as well. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Colombia.
Thank you very much, Colombia.
So far with interventions. In paragraph 1, we have in brackets welcomes and takes note. In paragraph 2, it was an insertion on governments, if I remember well. Paragraph 3 will say takes note of the general conclusions. And I understand your point because it's taking note and it's taking first is welcoming and then it's taking note of the conclusions in paragraph 3. Paragraph 4 also takes note of lessons learned, and paragraph 5 invites everybody to use it, to say shortly. This is the way now how the document looks like. Is in paragraph 3 and 4 are taking note. That's why I understand the suggestion is to welcomes at the very beginning, but I heard Brazil also mentioning that the preference for take note. And so to save time, I will, my suggestion is to keep in brackets these two words and send it as it is to be an L document to be discussed in a later stage when we have the face-to-face meeting. I see Norway asking for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to go back to Para 1, and I want to reiterate that I would like to keep welcome. I don't really want any text in brackets there. I think we should approve welcomes, because there's an overwhelming support of parties that supported to welcome the 5th edition of the GBO. There is one party that wants a different formulation. I suggest, and I reiterate, that party's suggestion is reflected in the footnote. The reason being that if we do not adopt that as almost a practice in the time ahead, we won't be able to finish the negotiations. So that would be my suggestion, and I would insist on it. Thank you.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. And thank you, Norway, for trying. Now I invite Brazil to consider these points, to accept welcomes in paragraph 1, in understanding is taking notes on paragraph 3, and also in paragraph 4, and also giving the opportunity to have a paragraph in the report explaining concerns. So in that sense, we can have a clean document to be sent to an L for further adoption. Remember that the last word will be when we have the L documents on a face-to-face meeting at the very end. But at least I will be happy if we can send clean text. So is that a possible way forward? So I give the floor to Brazil if can accept this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I'm failing to understand the situation here, because in the very beginning, I made clear what the situation was, and from the very beginning, we said that we were not happy. We were very concerned about this inclusion in the GBO5, and do not make reference to it. Now we have plenty of reference to GBO5. We're taking note of it. We're taking note of the conclusions. We're taking notes of the lessons learned, and we're even accepting to encourage parties to use it and to disseminate it. I'm surprised by the lack of understanding from other parties and this insistence. From our side, the discussion would already be over with your suggestion, and we're very thankful for your guidance on this issue, on looking for a compromise here. And I just want to remember that this is the decision of the Conference of the Parties. So it supposes that all parties of the convention are going along of this. We have no problem if the other parties want to use this document. We're just asking for this understanding, and I hope you to also lesson learned to the Secretariat and other stakeholders involved in this exercise, for if there will be future editions of this report on how they should be more cautious on selecting the works they include in the GBO. So, but to be clear, Mr. Chairman, we're very happy for our guidance. We're very happy with the result we arrived. It's a huge effort from our side. We're offering a hand here, and we just hope that the other side will accept this hand and you can move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I see two different views for paragraph 1. I don't see that we will reach an agreement at this stage. Being practical, my suggestion is to keep paragraph 1 with 2 words in brackets, with welcomes and text notes, and then to maintain the rest of the document clean. I'm trying to be practical. So I would like to see if there is any objection to adopt the document with the changes proposed, only bracket on paragraph 1 in the welcomes and takes note. The small amendment in paragraph 2, keeping paragraph 3 taking note of general conclusions. Paragraph 4 also taking notes of lessons learned from the implementation, and also paragraph 5 as it is. I would like to see if there is any objection from parties at this stage. I don't see any objection, then this CRP document is adopted. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I think it's time for a break. Let's take a 15 minutes break and we will continue with this agenda item. Unfortunately, I was too optimistic to finish by the break, but we will continue with the co-chair's report and on agenda item 3. So let's take a 15 minutes break and see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Chair, we can't hear you. You're probably on mute. Ezekiel, you can check just in case device settings.
Hello there. No. Sorry about that. This is strange. I hope you hear me now. Do you? Good. It seems like I don't hear you. Can you say something and then to start immediately?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can't. Sorry about that. Okay. No?
Can you hear us now?
Yes. Okay. I hear some echo. I hope won't make problems. Sorry about that, colleagues, but you know, technology is sometimes.
The echo is quite bad on your side.
Don't know what happened. Okay. I'm sorry. Now do you hear me? Good. But I cannot hear you. Can you say something?
So, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
All right. Sorry about that, colleagues. Well, let's reconvene with agenda item 3. And as I previously explained, we will not adopt any L documents. Adoption of L documents will be deferred to a later date at a physical meeting organized back-to-back with a physical meeting of the working group of post-2020 or the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I'm happy that for the first time we just adopt the first CRP on a virtual platform in our convention. Now we will hear a report back from the co-chairs of the contact group I established at the plenary on May 4th, including on their text, which contain scientific and technical advice from SBSTTA to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group on post-2020 global biodiversity framework and to the third meeting of this group, of the working group. These texts also include elements related to the monitoring framework and headline indicators. As I mentioned, a survey on the headline indicators was conducted as part of this contact group. And the findings of that survey are included in the co-chair's text and its annex. Headline indicators that receive at least 70% support, meaning more than 2/3 of those who respond to the survey, are shown in Table 1 of the co-chair's text as green. Those with 40 to 60% support are shown in gray, and those with less than 40% support are shown in red. However, many indicators with high to moderate support require further work to enhance standardization and comparability. Detailed comments from that survey are included in Document Crp 29. This is a very long and comprehensive document of some 500 pages. It's really long. It contains all your comments received through the online survey, and those None of your contributions are lost, just for you to be sure about this. That's why this document is that long. They will be available to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group as well. So with this, I invite the co-chairs of the contact group, Ann Teller from the EU and Jorge Murillo from Colombia, to report on their work. Mr. Murillo and Ms. Teller will be presenting the report, so you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I will be reporting to this meeting on behalf of Jorge and myself. So our contact group met 5 times between the 5th and the 11th of May. At the outset, we would like to thank all participants in the contact group for their flexibility, constructive attitude, and patience. In particular, I would like to thank our colleagues from Asia Pacific region, because my co-chair and I recognize that we ask a lot of them as a result of the time zone difference, and we really appreciate their willingness to extend the time available for our discussions when needed. Thank you again. I would also like to thank the observers that participated in the group for their understanding. My co-chair and I are aware that many more observers would have liked to be given the opportunity to express their views in the contact group. However, because of time constraint, this was not possible. I hope that the representatives of the observers do not interpret this as an indication that their views and expertise are not welcome. And my co-chair and I hope that all observers will continue to actively engage with and support the process of developing the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and the Convention more generally. Chair, as you will recall, the mandate you gave us was a big one. First, you tasked us to develop scientific and technical advice on the proposed goals and targets in the updated zero draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, making use of the information in the pre-session document at 2 Rev 1. The contact group spent 3 sessions discussing this issue, as well as general elements related to the monitoring framework and indicators. Also, in consultation with you, Chair, we initiated an online survey on headline indicators. Based on the discussions in the contact group, the survey result, as well as the interventions made in plenary and during the informal Substa meeting last February, my co-chair and I have prepared a co-chair's text. This text is accompanied by an annex with the very preliminary results of the survey provided graphically for each headline indicator. Additionally, many parties and observers provided detailed comments in the survey. As you said, Chair, these comments have been pulled together in an information document, INF 29. The text we have prepared is our best attempt to capture the diverse range of views expressed on scientific and technical advice, on goals and targets, and the monitoring framework. Our understanding is that you will forward this text to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group in your capacity as a Substa chair and invite them to consider it when preparing the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have emphasized in the document that this text was not negotiated, nor is it intended to replace the official intervention from parties. It's also without prejudice to parties raising additional issues at the Open-Ended Working Group 3. We believe this report contains useful scientific and technical advice for the co-chairs to be aware of in the drafting, and my co-chair and I would like to commend all the participants in the contact group for the advice they have provided. Now, Mr. Chair, as already mentioned, my co-chair and I also asked the Secretariat to organize this in-session survey to capture the range of views on the specific headline indicators that have been proposed in the draft of the monitoring framework. We received responses from 60 parties and 76 observers. The results of the survey have been summarized in the co-chair text and its annex, and all of the survey responses have been captured in Information Document 29, as already noted. It is our understanding that the Secretariat will use the survey result, along with the more general views expressed, to revise the monitoring framework when aligning it with the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So we try to do our best with the very short time we had, but it's not, a full analysis that we are very aware of. The second element of the mandate that you gave us was to address issues and recommendations related to the monitoring framework for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Monitoring Framework that had been presented in Document 3 and 3 Add 1. The contact group spent 2 sessions on this issue, working on the basis of a non-paper developed based on comments received during plenary on 3 and 4 May, as well as those provided in the informal session in February. The results of our deliberation are presented in Document SBSTTA-24 Crp Iii. The contact group focused its deliberations on those issues where there were particularly divergent views and worked to arrive at a consensus or to narrow down the possible options. In particular, the contact group discussed the issue of baseline, that's paragraph 2, the timing for finalizing the monitoring framework and possible review processes, paragraph 3 and its 2 alternatives, and the terms of reference for an ad hoc technical expert group. This is the annex and paragraph 13. In order to advance our discussion on baselines, my co-chair and I also established a small friend of the chair group to discuss this issue in greater detail. We are grateful to everyone who participated in this discussion and helped us to arrive at a deeper understanding of this issue. The text in paragraph 2 is the result of those discussions. Chair, you will note that the paragraph 1 just mentioned still have square bracket. While not resolve all issues during the contact group, my co-chair and I are confident that these paragraphs are a good basis for continuing our discussions on these issues. Chair, in concluding, my co-chair and I would like once again to thank all the participants in the contact group for their efforts throughout our sessions. We would also like to thank the colleagues from the Secretariat who supported our discussions, as well as the technicians and moderators working behind the scene to make sure our discussions could happen in an effective manner. These are not normal times, and we have all had to get used to different ways of working. Despite these challenges, we believe that we accomplished a lot in this very first online contact group, and that we have taken another important step towards the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework later this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Anne and Jorge for your very hard work and dedication, as well as that of the entire contact group. Certainly these are new times and we are adapting to these conditions. But thank you very much again. It was a lot of work on all these sessions and the work and the outcomes. Colleagues, as we have just heard, the co-chair's text was not negotiated, nor is intended to replace the official intervention from parties. It is also without prejudice to parties making additional comments on this issue at the third meeting of the open-ended working group. That is the place where it will be negotiated when we have the zero draft. Parties will have further opportunities to express their views at the third meeting of the open-ended working group. So I urge you to refrain from making interventions. Given the nature of the co-chair's text, my suggestion to make the most of our limited time here is to avoid a detailed discussion on the context of the text in this venue. As such, I would like to suggest that I, in my capacity as chair of SBSTA, forward this document as the text developed by the co-chairs of the contact group in consultation with me to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group for them to take into account when preparing the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, together with Document SBSTTA-24 3-2 Red 1 on all your original statements. I hope this is acceptable to you all. All right. I see Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor.
Y simplemente hacer un comentario sobre...
I would like to make a comment on the text, which is important to point out. We think that the co-chairs have done good work in terms of representing these different visions, but we'd like to take into consideration two questions for the co-chairs when considering this document. First of all, that the revision of Add To was done with very little time to consider this document. That's not been mentioned in the summary of the co-chairs. And then secondly, we don't think that we should summarize the support for the headline indicators, the responses that say yes, but need more work. We think it's important to differentiate between the two. So yes and no comment. I think that could be considered as support for the headline indicators, and an answer that says yes but needs more work means that there needs to be more discussion related to other themes within the development of the GBF. For example, resource mobilization, technology transfer, and provision of funding. So I think that we cannot just say that the yes but equals complete support for the headline indicator. So these are the comments to add to what you've already said. Thank you, Argentina. So we'll take account of your comments. These were the best efforts that were made by the co-chairs to try and cover the different elements, to try and advise the co-chairs of the OEWG, and the expression of the analysis of the headline indicators is important to not to be interpreted as complete support. It's just an analysis of how the parties responded. And there was some that were supported, and there were other headline indicators that do still need work. We can't just say that there's de facto support for all these headline indicators. So we have to bear all of those considerations in mind. So thank you for having flagged up those details. And I'm going to give the floor to France, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to intervene rapidly. I would like to thank the co-chairs for writing up this text. We would like, nonetheless, to emphasize that Target 2 reflected wide support of 30% of that target in reference to number 2, and also the ecosystem services for OECMs and areas. We would like to see that reflected in the text. We underscore that we do not want to change the text, but it is important for us to emphasize these two aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franz. As I said before, my invitation is not to touch the text. If we start making amendments, will not be necessarily the reflection of co-chairs. If you have some points, I invite you to go to these positions if needed when we go to the meeting of the open-ended working group. So once again, my invitation is to agree that I can convey this report to the co-chairs together with the document II. Yeah, unless it's just a mistake or something, probably, but better not to touch it. It was a very good work by co-chairs, a balanced way to show different views. And I believe at the end of the day, what we want is good advice, and I think it's full of good elements for co-chairs to take into account to enhance and to prepare draft 0. Now I give the floor. I have only one party, Sweden, asking for the floor, followed by Denmark, and I hope we can take a decision. Sweden. Sweden, you have the floor. We can't hear Sweden. Meanwhile, I give the floor to Denmark.
Thank you, Chair. You hear me? You do. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, and great thanks to the co-chairs of the contact group for their quite hard and dedicated work. And indeed, many points were raised and taken on board. It's just to flag on the summary of the annex that has omitted the responses on the indicators that are not relevant, and also the clustering of yes and yes with work. So we share some of those concerns, and we would perhaps propose for the chair to consider. I mean, since it would be given to the co-chairs of the post-2020 as it is, it would form the basis for the further work. So we would propose for you to consider in order to give the co-chairs of the post-2020 a fuller picture of the responses, then indicate the responses for each of the 3 categories, and preferably with an indication of the number of comments received to each proposed indicators. I think that would give a more comprehensive picture, still in a summary form, of the many concerns and deliberations we had on these indicators. That would be our proposals for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Denmark. Thanks for that recommendations. Let me see if we can include a few points as part of the report from the meeting as additional points of advice, but not as part of the co-chair's report. I don't know if the Secretary has something to clarify, but again, it's not intention to open for negotiation the document. The point well taken, and the number of responses in each one. We have percentages already. This is part of the advice, and of course, there's a very long document, an info document that contains all points expressed by parties. That's why it's over 500 pages for you to be sure that there is no loss of information. So I would like to see if we can then send this text to the co-chairs. But I see it was Sweden. Let's try again, and then Colombia. And I hope we can take a decision soon.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Chair. Sweden would like to thank the chairs for their efforts to capture all the parties' positions presented during the informal and formal Substa meeting. However, the text remains on a very general level for a scientific and technical analysis of the goals and targets of the GBF, and is therefore crucial that the open-ended working group co-chairs consider also the presented and submitted written statements by parties and observers for the further development of the GBF. We need a certain level of detail to ensure that the goals and targets are smart, and that we have a common understanding of terms, concepts, and definitions used in the GBF. Our discussion at Open-Ended Working Group 3 and the first draft of the GBF should really build on what was said and submitted during the last weeks and months. We identified some gaps in the report, but we also don't want to open the document at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sweden. Of course, when we when I convey this report to co-chairs, I can make that observation that also take into account interventions from parties at the informal session and at the plenary, together with the report and the document on advice. Yes, we should remember that this is mainly on advice, on goals and targets, and there's some survey on headline indicators, but also we have CRP 3 that we will see later on monitoring framework. I have Colombia followed by EU. Colombia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would also like to thank the co-chairs of the contact group for presenting all our views in a very balanced way. We would like to support Argentina and Denmark on their proposals, and we would also like to kindly request if the graphs presented in the annex of the co-chair's text could be presented in colors, because when we have to interpret what is presented under the color black, is very, very hard to understand. And we would also like to request if an explanation could be included in the annex with respect to what are the axes X and Y, because it's not very clear. So we would only like to request to improve the document in this regard. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Colombia.
Thank you, Colombia.
Secretariat gets the points on colors and numbers. I hope this is something maybe we can add to the annex. We're just referring to the annex in order to improve the way to communicate in this graphical way the points. I'm wondering if Secretary would like to add something in this understanding and probably make a try. I mean, not negotiating, you were just making specific points to enhance understanding and to clarify. You want to say something on this point, Julian?
Sure. I did choose black and white just in case anyone is colorblind. I was trying to keep that in my mind, but I'm happy to use colors as well, and just try to select bright colors that will still stand out for people who don't see in color. So that was the choice of the gray and the black, but I'm happy to change that from the Secretariat side. I think that's a minor editorial issue. Additionally, there are on the axis, they are labeled. The bottom is labeled with question 1 and question 2 because we were trying to avoid the translation. And so then in the main document, we list out specifically what those questions are. And I can see, we actually went back and forth on this, but we were trying to save some effort on the translation just to make it clear that we had these two questions, and then we listed them out in the chair's text. But I think we could also put a footnote in the document in a different way. I mean, it is also in the footnote in this document, but we could try to make that a little bit more clear. In terms of the other axis, obviously, this is just percentage as it is labeled. In the main document, we had attempted with the co-chairs really not to make any summary of the graphs. My own view is that there are many, many ways that we could show this data. We could certainly show it, we could combine different indicators. We could try to summarize which indicators have more or less support. It's kind of a preliminary analysis at this point where this is really just the raw data. I mean, the survey was only completed a few days ago, and we quickly tried to summarize the raw data. I want to mention, though, that the co-chairs will have access to the complete data. Obviously, they'll have access to the comments and also to the rest of the data, and we will continue to work with them to supply them with whatever type of analysis that they would like to see, whether they want regional analysis or if they want something else. As I mentioned, the co-chairs will have access to this raw data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll try to have this improvement in the annex to facilitate understanding. Of course, as you can see, there are two questions there. One in general, and then the applicability of national and global, and then The grays, of course, are showing that we need to improve those headline indicators. But this is what we need to have from co-chairs is draft 0, and then all, as we will see on CRP3, there's a lot of work to do. And I hope we can proceed with that. Now I'll give the two final parties, EU followed by Peru, and then to have a decision.
Yeah, Chair, I think it's not EU. I think it's the co-chair. I just wanted to, to repeat what in fact Gillian said, that it was our decision of the co-chairs of the contact group, not to make any detail. I mean, we wouldn't have had time anyway of the survey, but to provide all the materials so that further work could be done. And we discussed whether to put anything in annex, because we could have just referred to the survey, but we thought we heard the parties asking for getting some feedback, and so we tried to do some quick and dirty work so that they could have a kind of feeling of of the results of the survey. But it's not at all something which is finished, and it will require further work, and that's something we need to check in the procedural report of the meeting, that we are sure that all this material will be used by the co-chair of the open-ended working group when drafting the draft 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then once again, thank you very much for the hard work. It was very difficult. And you did a great job compiling views, and for transparency, the information is there, and will be also available for co-chairs to analyze as needed. I give the floor to Peru. Peru tiene la palabra.
You have the floor, Peru. Thank you, Chair. We'd also like to congratulate the co-chairs for their excellent efforts, excellent work. We suggest that we should prioritise the headline indicators for strengthening capacity and development of capacity, and that they can be able to be implemented by countries. We would also like to point out that in this text we've got certain subjects that were considered as crucial, and they need to continue to be reviewed so that we can have a document that will allow us to be able to get this approved by all parties. Thank you very much, Peru. Yes, that's how we've understood this document. We've got limited time for the following documents here, P3.
And understanding. With this, I will send this text to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group. And thank you very much to all parties and observers. I know there's limited time, and some of them are asking for the floor. I do thank your comprehension, and we would like to. I would like to move forward. Thank you very much. Then I will convey the report of co-chairs with the annex, and including InfDoc with all statements from participants. The annex, which is reflecting also observers and parties' views. I think this is a good exercise. Thank you very much, and congratulations to co-chairs of the contact group and secretariat and all participants. Very good. We still have time, so let's start with the consideration of document CRP Iii. On post-2020 global biodiversity framework, scientific and technical information to support the review of updated goals and targets and related indicators and baselines. As the co-chairs of the contact group already explained, some of the paragraphs in the CRP have been extensively discussed in the contact group. The contact group met on 8th and 11th of May, and the co-chairs of the contact group also established a Friends of the Chair group, which met on Monday, 10 May, specifically to consider the issue of baselines, current paragraph 2 of recommendation to COP15. This paragraph is presented as it came from the Friends of the Chair group. However, despite of those efforts, I know that some square brackets remain. The paragraphs of the pre-session document that were not discussed in the contact group were revised based on the interventions heard during the informal meeting of SUBSTA in February, as well as the interventions made in the plenaries during this meeting. I should note that the comments that we received on the paragraphs not discussed at the contact group were generally going in the same direction, and I did not see any major points of divergence. The CRP also went through the usual editing process based on UN language standards. So my intention is to consider this entire CRP paragraph by paragraph and to try to remove square brackets where we can. So let's move into discussions of paragraph 1. Let me check my screen again. Yes. So good. So I open the floor for comments on paragraph 1. I see Canada. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. You mentioned at the beginning of this session that there has not been a focus on subsidiary body recommendations for post-2020 framework items, as we have also seen with SBI, given that the L documents will not be approved until just before COP15. So while we agree with the focus of the SBSTA recommendations in paragraphs 1 and also following through to 4, which have not had discussion yet of the CRP, in the interest of simplicity, we wonder if these first 4 paragraphs should be removed, as they will not be able to be used by the co-chairs or the open-ended working group 3, given the timing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I think you refer to the first 3 paragraphs. Because paragraph 4 is the one with the recommendation to the conference of the parties. And one way forward is to delete paragraph 3. That's one possibility, because it certainly is a procedural matter, but we are preparing now with a document that will be revised when it comes to a document I'm still hearing concerns about my son. I will speak up. I hope that can turn into better. And so one possibility is to delete paragraph 3 and then go straight to the recommendations to the conference of the parties. Thank you, Canada, for the suggestions. I see no more requests from the floor, so I would like to pose the suggestion to delete paragraph 3. I see Norway. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We don't mind moving the paragraph out of this document, but we want to make sure that it's captured in the report, because this paragraph, the way we see it, is also referring to some intersessional work, especially on the updating, making documents available for the open-ended working group. So we'd also just like to seek your advice that this will be captured. And in that same regard, we have one suggested amendment in sentence number 6 of para 3, the way it reads now. It says that the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework prior to the third meeting of the open-ended working group. We'd like to say making it available for consideration at the third meeting of the open-ended working group. But just to reiterate, we're perfectly fine with this being captured in the report from the meeting, just so we don't miss out on intersessional work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. Well, on the consultations also, what about if we delete paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, and we just go straight to where substat is recommended conference of the parties to adopt a decision? Because any intersessional work from now to the open-ended working group and until COP, at least our contribution to co-chairs will be on the report, including co-chairs, so maybe we can save time and go straight to the recommendation. So when presenting in the report of the co-chairs, I can make comments on this point, because this is what we are providing to co-chairs of the open-ended for preparation of draft 0. I would like to see if there's an agreement, if we can delete the first 3 paragraphs and starting straight to the recommendation of the Conference of the Parties, in the understanding that the CRP will turn into a mail document that has to be adopted in a face-to-face meeting that mostly is going to be at the COP time and not before the open-ended working group 3. So we need to ensure that we send all the materials properly, as we already agreed with the report. I see Belgium. I hope it's not an objection. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We think we could agree with your suggestion, but then we would want some of our concerns to be reflected in the report, and that is regarding paragraph 3. When it asks to update the proposed list of headline indicators, we think it's important to update the monitoring framework, including the proposed headline indicators, as well as the list of components and complementary indicator. We would like this to appear in the report as intersessional work. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Mr. Chair, sorry.
Thank you, Belgium. So I will work with the Secretariat to include some lines in this regard when presenting this report to co-chairs. Okay, I see no objections. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. No, this is not an objection. This is just to support also what Norway said. I think it's important to mention the content and take it, as you also suggested, into the report. So in that sense, I think we can agree with the suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So let's move to paragraph 4. So I open the floor for comments on paragraph 4. Which, well, paragraph 4 includes now sorry about that, the draft decisions to the Conference of the Parties. And let's go to paragraph 2 that starts with decides. And as it was noted, this paragraph was extensively discussed by friends of the chair group. And that's why we have a number of brackets that I hope we can clear. And I give the floor to Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. But if you indulge me, regarding paragraph 1, my understanding is that this paragraph would remain between brackets until the final development of the monitoring framework. The decision of adopting the monitoring framework is pending the final refinement of this monitoring framework. Am I correct?
Argentina, si se fija, el párrafo 1 tiene...
If you look at paragraph 1, you'll see that there is a footnote. And in the footnote, it says that there could be changes. It says in English.
...of further discussions, including negotiations in the third meeting of the working group on the post-2020 and finalized by the Conference of the Parties. I believe that it solves your concerns, and there is no need to keep it in brackets because it's indicating that will be subject to changes. I hope that clarifies your point, and we can have a clean paragraph 1 of recommendation to COP. Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. But we consider that this is a very, very important paragraph. And even though we agree that the footnote may clarify a little bit, we think that this is very much linked to discussions in the open-ended working group and in SBI, etc. So we would like to keep the paragraph between brackets, this particular one. We're not against adopting a monitoring framework in COP 15, but we think that that it is very much linked to other things. So that would be our suggestion, and we would be more comfortable with having the paragraph in brackets. Thank you.
Gracias, Argentina. Malaysia.
Thank you, Argentina. Malaysia.
Thank
We can't hear you, Malaysia. Can you try again?
Hello? Okay,
Go ahead, Malaysia.
Chair. Malaysia would like to seek clarification. Thank you, Chair. Malaysia would like to seek clarification on two terms used here. First one will be line 2, the phrase otherwise indicated. Line 4 on the word conditions. And finally, Chair, with regards to line 4, the word in bracket, the different responsibilities, we feel that phrase is out of context, as the para here, its primary intent aims to focus on the time period. Thank you, Chair.
Malaysia, can you repeat again, because I had difficulties to hear you very well, and I'd like to be sure that also Secretariat notes your intervention. Please repeat it again.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
With regards to line 2, please clarify what is meant by unless otherwise indicated. In line 4, please clarify conditions mean. And finally, Chair, with regards to line 4, the word different responsibilities in bracket, we opine that this is somewhat out of context, as the intent of the para focuses on the time period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. My understanding of the expression unless otherwise indicated is connected to use the period for 2011-2020 when data is available as a reference period, unless there's something else indicated. So it's leaving the door open for other references, other time span, and connecting, for example, to the very last part of the paragraph, including available information on pre-industrial period, for example. But maybe Secretariat have a different interpretation. Please, Secretariat.
So on this paragraph in the Friends of the Chair group, there was some experts that contributed to a glossary and to some scientific advice on baselines. And so the Secretariat will work with the open-ended working group co-chairs to also then develop a glossary that can be used. This glossary would, I think, address the concerns that you have on the definition of the word conditions and periods. All of that will be covered in the glossary, and we have been working with some of these experts to try to make sure that this glossary can be developed in time. So I think that, as I mentioned, the Friends of the Chair group really looked at this and these terminologies in great detail. And so I'm hoping that the glossary will also address many of the concerns that those of you who did not participate in the Friends of the Chair have. In terms of the unless otherwise indicated, this is to reflect that some indicators really may not need a baseline. For example, and this was again from the experts, in order to achieve the 30 by 30 target that comes up again and again, where there is not really a need for a baseline in order to determine if 30% of area is protected. And so this could be reflected in the metadata for specific indicators. So later on in this decision and in the terms of reference for the expert group, there is this mention of metadata, and each of these metadata would include information on the baseline. And so this would be a way to point out if there are specific indicators that actually where a baseline is not as relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for the explanation. I give the floor to Sweden, followed by Morocco.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Great, just to be sure. In line with Malaysia, we would like to support to delete different responsibilities while we are open to lift the brackets on most of the other items. For us, different responsibilities are not relevant here. We cannot have different baselines for different parties. And for that reason, we would like to see that part removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. Morocco, you have the floor, followed by EU.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding paragraph 2, where we have choices to make regarding deletion of brackets, my delegation proposes on line 3, after Global Biodiversity Framework, to take out the brackets while taking note and recognizes to be deleted. The second choice we would make regarding the penultimate line would be to take into account of historical trends. We would like to keep that version and not historic loss. Thirdly, we would like to delete the last line, which says including available information on the pre-industrial period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Morocco. Now we'll give the floor to Colombia, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to support parties who have requested for the deletion of the text in brackets referring to different responsibilities. We would also be willing to leave the brackets for historical trends. We're very supportive of this text. And also to support Morocco on their proposals to delete historic laws and the text in the last brackets referring to the pre-industrial period. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Colombia. Doy la palabra a México.
Thank you very much, Colombia. Now I'll give the floor to Mexico, please. Thank you, Chair. Mexico would like to support Malaysia's proposal and Sweden and Morocco about deleting the reference to different responsibilities. And we support Colombia in terms of lifting the square brackets around historical trends, and therefore to delete the reference to historic loss and also delete the reference at the end, including available information on the pre-industrial period. Thank you very much, Mexico.
Followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. UK would support interventions by Malaysia to delete different responsibilities, and Morocco, Colombia, and Mexico on the other suggestions, and we'd also want to lift the brackets on 2011 to 2020. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Now I'll give the floor to Brazil.
Well, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Well, I think Argentina was ahead of us, but if they don't mind, perhaps you should check with them if they're okay.
Okay, sorry about that, but my screen is jumping, so I'll give the floor to Argentina, followed by Brazil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't really know who was first or afterwards. I'm not keeping track of that. Pero voy a cambiar a español.
I'm going to change into Spanish. In our case, we would like to support lifting the square brackets around and recognizes. And we suggest maintaining different responsibilities, but we're open to discuss different types of wording to reflect different levels of participation of different countries in this process of loss of biodiversity because of their different contributions to the loss of biodiversity. And we think it's important for this to be captured in the baselines. And we also think it's important to maintain historic loss. And we can also support including available information on the pre-industrial period. It's interesting, we think, to have a differentiation between reference period and baseline conditions and periods that has been introduced, and we are happy to work on reinforcing that distinction with the different square brackets texts. Thank you, and thank you for your flexibility there. If you've got alternative wording for different responsibilities, then that would be very useful to see if we could reach consensus on that point. Now, Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, regarding paragraph 2, we suggest keeping the brackets in the periods 2011-2020, and we would agree with removing brackets after recognizes. And we do find it important to have a reference to historic loss and also to information on the pre-industrial period. As well, I'd like to recall that during the Friends of the Chair meeting, we have very constructive discussions on the fact that we need a fair and equitable baseline that captures the process of biodiversity loss in a balanced and comprehensive manner. So we do find it important to keep the reference to pre-industrial period and also historic loss. And this would be our initial reaction to paragraph 2. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Brazil. I have France, Switzerland, Uganda, Japan, Norway. But before giving the floor, I would like to make an intent, because we have 15 minutes left, and it's a 5 pages document. And I was expecting also to deal with invasive species as an item, and it seems like it's taking longer. We know this has been an extensively discussed document by the Friends of the Chair. And I would like to go backwards from the end to the start of this paragraph. If I see that even there are differences on including available information on pre-industrial period, if we take out the brackets and keep the text, but also if we keep 2011 and 2020, we leave the door open to use information on the last decade, and also leave, when applicable, to use information on pre-industrial period. If you see the different headline or the different indicators, and very few of them can use information from pre-industrial period, but we leave the door open. I think this can be a compromise. So my suggestion is to delete brackets around including available information pre-industrial period, but also to delete brackets on 2011-2020. My suggestion is also to delete historical loss and to use historical trends. So trends can be on positive or negative, on gain or loss, I think is included, right? And also, I appreciate the desire to take out different responsibilities. We have already desirable states or levels of ambition, but I also stay open to listen Argentina if they have some proposals. And then we have while noting and recognize. We can keep both expressions. So this is my intent to move. I hope this can be acceptable by saying to decide to use a period of 2011-2020 where data is available as the reference period unless otherwise indicated, for reporting and monitoring progress in the implementation of the post-2020 framework. While noting and recognize that baselines, conditions, and periods used to express desirable states or levels of ambition in goals and targets should, with relevant, take into account historical trends, current status, and future scenarios of biodiversity, including available information on the pre-industrial period. I hope this can be a compromise. So we're keeping these parts. We are not including different responsibilities. We're leaving the door open to use information on pre-industrial period. We're using historical trends that can go to gain or to loss. So I think this is more technically adequate to look at the different things. Now, I would like to know, I know that I see many hands, but I like to know if we can go along with my proposal. If is there any objection to my proposal of this text, keeping 2011-2020 and keeping available information on pre-industrial period when it's available, noting and recognizing that this is used to express desirable states and levels of ambitions, and also taking into account historical trends. Is there any objection? I see France, Switzerland, and Uganda. Are you objecting to my suggestion?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't tell you right now if we object to this or not because we just heard the proposal. On that, we support removing the brackets on 2011-2020. We accept using historical trends and deleting different responsibilities. I think that we would also support keeping while noting and recognizing. It doesn't seem to be a problem, but I can't confirm it, nor can I confirm that we would agree with keeping a reference to the pre-industrial period. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Seems you concur with my suggestion, but I give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Uganda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the suggestion. We are just looking into this. I think we can agree with the elements of the first part that you have suggested. However, we would like to support Morocco, Colombia, and many others, as just France before, that we do support to delete the last part on the information on pre-industrial period. Otherwise, it looks like we are still looking into this, but the last part is what we cannot support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. I was trying to get this as a compromise in understanding that we can use as a main basis 2011-2020, but leaving the door open when available information, when applicable, maybe to use that information. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We certainly appreciate your efforts and the spirit to get us make progress. However, we do have a different opinion. With due respect, Chair, we wish to retain the brackets on 211, 220. We wish to lift the brackets on recognizes as proposed by Argentina and Brazil. We wish to retain or maintain different responsibilities. And we also wish to maintain historical loss, as well as including available information on the pre-industrial period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. After listening to this, and unfortunately, I see that my proposal is not accepted. We will not go anywhere. I hear strong support to delete pre-industrial times, different responsibilities, delete brackets from 2011, 2020, but we just heard that we like to retain brackets in all different sections. So I see that, unfortunately, we cannot delete brackets at this stage. And then my suggestion is to leave this paragraph as it is for the L document, and I hope we can make more progress on the face-to-face meeting. I see no more requests from the floor, so now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 3. I see the EU is asking for the floor.
Yeah, sorry. I think the Secretariat should think of a way to distinguish EU from co-chair of the contact group, because it's a bit difficult for me to intervene. But I just wanted to try to help you, Mr. Chair, and say that the paragraphs which have been discussed in the contact group, even if they still contain a lot of brackets, maybe to save time, it would be better to leave them as they are, because I think we went as far as we could in the contact group, and I don't think that we can easily lift the brackets right now. So I would suggest that unless they are really big mistakes or things which could be sorted out quickly, that we keep the text as it was delivered from the contact group. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and co-chair of the contact group. You did a great job. You tried your best. It was extensively discussed by the friends of the chair, and so let's keep the text as it is. And I thank you very much for your efforts. Now I open the floor on paragraph 3. As you can see, we have the original text with brackets. There is an alt version with one bracket, and I also am presenting alt 2 as my proposal with no brackets on this point, which says decides to undertake a scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its document in development as appropriate by SBSTA and for subsequent consideration by the Conference of the Parties at the 16th meeting, and thereafter to keep the monitoring on the review. This is a procedural text to keep working on this. And so I hope you can see my proposal on how to acceptable, but I now open the floor for comments. I have Malaysia, followed by UK and Morocco. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I am a little bit confused on para 3, line 2. It says to finish its development as appropriate in brackets. However, if you are expecting COP15 to adopt the monitoring framework, then the development must be completed before and not at COP16 or 17. On the second matter, we have concerns of the monitoring framework being reviewed so soon after its adoption at COP. Because we feel that this would seriously inconvenience the reporting process, as changes made to the monitoring framework may cause serious setback to the progress of the targets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. Well, that's why I was suggesting L2 paragraph to replace the long one at the very beginning. Of course, we will adopt a framework that until we have the final version of the framework, we will need to make necessary adjustments. That's why we're working on terms of reference from my expert group, and then Substa will to undertake again, and then to submit at the Conference of the Parties the revised version. So that's why it's a sequence. Yeah, and to avoid discussion, if it's 16 or 17, it should go to the next Conference of the Parties. And as appropriate, we will continue improving the monitoring framework. That's the spirit, that's the rationale, and I hope this can be acceptable. I see the UK followed by Morocco and Mexico. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As you will realise, the contact group did spend a long time on this paragraph. And actually, I do wonder whether we need this paragraph 3. If we go down to paragraph 11, we decide to establish an ad hoc technical group, setting out its purpose to operationalize the monitoring framework. And we also discuss the terms of reference for the RTEG. So in effect, paragraph 11 operationalizes what we've been trying to say in paragraph 3. And I wonder whether we need that duplication between paragraph 3 and paragraph 11, because the actual work will be done by the RTEG. But there would be, in that circumstances, a couple of additions to make, which would be in paragraph 11 to advise on the further development and operationalization of the monitoring framework, because I think that's part of what was in paragraph 3. And also then there's another paragraph to be added, which is just to request the Substa to review the outcomes of the RTEG and make that information available for COP. So it's just one step that is missing in the sequence. And I think that would then mean that we could resolve some of the issues around paragraph 3, because effectively the text which is already agreed or is already set out in 11 would address that issue.
Thank you, UK. I understand your point. However, I believe paragraph 3 is more general because it's also leaving to Substa to work and not only to the expert group to work on this. So I still wondering if you consider acceptable L2, because it's leaving open, it's giving the opportunity to Substa to work on this, and also we're working on the mandate for this group.
Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just like to remind that it's already 10 a.m.
Oh,
and our time as interpreters is over, so you may wish to wrap up this session. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was very concentrated on our discussions, trying to move forward. We need to close our session for today. We're really behind the schedule. So I invite you to continue tomorrow with our deliberations. And it is important also tomorrow to address the first reading of agenda item 10. Otherwise, we will not have a CRP document with 36 hours in advance to continue our deliberations. So my suggestion is to work little time more on CRP3 to do our best until the break, and then to continue with agenda item 10 for the first reading. So Secretariat will be able to present a CRP on invasive species, and then we can defer if needed discussion on CRP3 for the third block of plenaries. Tomorrow is our last day of plenaries from this block, and well, I thank you very much, and thank you for the interpreters to extend this few minutes more, and see you tomorrow. So for today, this session is adjourned. Thank you very much.